All righty, wonderful. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you for being a part of it. We thank you for your being a part of this great 2 days of third annual Black Educator Symposium and Black Male Educator Symposium. And we're thankful for just for you being a part of it. I would normally begin with the poem by Dr. Benjamin Mays, where he talks about all we have is just 1 minute, just 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, I can't refuse it. I did not seek it or choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I will suffer if I lose it. Give an account if I abuse it. It's a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. And sometimes we'll begin with that thought. I'm just thankful that you guys have decided. I thank you for your advocacy, for your zeal, for your dedication, to be a part of this symposium in spite of COVID. COVID hasn't stopped this. COVID hasn't stopped this from going on for 3 straight years. So we're glad that you decided to be a part of it once again this year. So hot topic, Dr. Godly Muhammad kind of dropped the mic yesterday around this, really dealing with some of it. That wasn't her whole, when she was with Dr. Daniels, but some of what she was saying kind of will piggyback, it kind of will be something that I'll go over a little bit more. But critical race theory and removing false fears related to critical race theory. Critical race theory is being it's a hot button issue, as we all know. It's a very controversial, but not for valid reasons, controversial matter. It's very, school boards are turned upside down, elections, candidates, many of them don't want to talk about it. Many of them want to run from it. Many of them don't want to even address the issue. And so what are some of these things that are the false fears related to it? How can we kind of combat these fears and kind of combat the background noise? So if we can combat these kind of falsehoods, kind of this false narrative and perspective related to it, because as Dr. Muhammad mentioned, racism is not being banned, white supremacy is not being banned, but it seems like we want to ban history. We want to ban something that will deal with a system that deals with it, basically is only taught in law schools primarily, but it's become an issue because it's been a manufactured issue that has been brought about. I don't want to go into too much about me. I'm an educational consultant. I'm also a mentor with the Houston Independent School District. I volunteer with their Ascending to Men program, which helps young men with goal setting, with planning for college, and helping young men just have a strategy for success. So I volunteer with that. I'm also a speaker and also co-authored a book recently, Still I Thrive. So that's a little bit about me. I've been, all my siblings are educators. My brothers and my sister are all teachers in the public school system in Texas. And I'm based out of Houston, Texas.
I want somebody to see.
Also, if at any point you want to stop me and ask questions or stop me and interject, feel free to stop me at any time if you feel like you need to. Whatever it might be, you can feel free to do so. Basically, Christopher Rufo, who was a conservative activist, he invented the conflict over critical race theory. It was one article that I pulled up from the New Yorker where it talks about how he was raised up, he was used as an instrument basically to make this to be an issue that would be used to stir up white rage, to stir up people to be against it. And so I'm just going to read a quote from the article where it says that the story was a phenomenon and helped to generate more leaks from across the country. Marooned at home, civil servants recorded and photographed their own anti-racism training and sent the evidence to Rufo. Reading through these documents and others, Rufo noticed that they tend to cite a small set of popular anti-racism books by authors such as Ibram X. Kendi, and Robin DiAngelo. Rufo read the footnotes in these books and found that they pointed to academic
They
scholarship
have a church.
by a group of legal scholars who referred to their work as critical race theory, in particular, Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell. And as I'm assuming most of us, I'm pretty sure most of us know those who came up with the concept or the paradigm. Basically, you have Kimberly Race Bell, or Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell. But more so critical race theory because of what Nicole Hannah-Jones with the 1619 Project, that's been kind of the flashpoint of the dialogue related to critical race theory. But she makes some great, and I saw her on Meet the Press. She did an awesome job kind of refuting some of the false narrative about it. But this is kind of some of what has led to this brouhaha regarding this. And it says, further the article, last thing says, these scholars argue that the white supremacy of the past lived on in the laws and societal rules of the present. As Crenshaw recently explained, critical race theory found that the so-called American dilemma was not simply a matter of prejudice, but a matter of structured disadvantage that stretched across American society. So basically, that's what kind of this really, that's the whole in a nutshell.
Thing I hate about our street, this snow finna be here for the next 2 weeks.
That's kind of the nutshell of how this has
If
been.
you only looked out here, you would be like, I'm not going nowhere.
I can't, I almost can't have the music.
I know that. I don't didn't want to go over the stocks.
Excuse me, Mr. Wall, there's that interruption is Miss Arsenio Tate. Would you mind muting?
Can I mute or she has? Okay,
She just muted herself.
Okay.
I think you can. I think you can mute.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. All right, thank you, Dr. So basically, when Rufo and other activists, basically in similar way as to the drumbeat of negativity or false narrative about Black Lives Matter or other perspectives, it's basically been a ginned up propaganda campaign against so-called critical race theory. To get people all riled up, to get them frustrated, enrage them, to get them to believe that the world is going to end because of a theory that's only taught in law school or taught in graduate school. And so that's kind of where this is where, and so I'm sure, as we know, we have to fight back against this false narrative and against this propaganda campaign that has been put in place all throughout the country. Some of the objections we have to address, overstepping. Many say that, and this was kind of what was in the Virginia gubernatorial campaign with Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin, where that was a flashpoint where it talks about overstepping parental authority. Basically the notion that I don't want my kids to know about critical race theory. I don't want them to know about these things. I want to be able to tell them what they need to know. That's one of the objections to critical race theory. Another objection is that it's anti-white. The objection that, well, it's reverse racism. And so really, sometimes whenever change is going to be made, whenever improvements and advancement, you always seem to get that boogeyman of reverse racism comes into place. So that's one of the objections to critical race theory. Also socialistic, some say socialism, and also Marxist. Those are some of them. And these are not bad words though, in essence, really. They shouldn't be words that are, words that we can't utter, but that's some of the objections that you find to critical race theory. And if someone wants to chime in, definitely chime in. I was reading an article, and one of the things it says, why did the president of the United States, former president, thank goodness, the former president, why did the former president of the United States, in the midst of a pandemic and an economic crisis, take it upon himself to attack critical race theory? Perhaps Donald Trump appreciated the power of this groundbreaking intellectual movement to change the world. In recent years, critical race theory has vaulted out of the academy and into courtrooms, newsrooms, and onto the streets. And no wonder, as intersectionality theorist Kimberly Crenshaw recently told Times Magazine, it's an approach to grappling with the history of white supremacy that rejects the belief that what's in the past is in the past, and that the laws and systems that grow from that past are detached from it. The panic denunciations from the right notwithstanding, CRT has changed the way millions of people interpret our troubled world. Edited by its principal founders and leading theoreticians, Critical Race Theory was the first book to gather the movement's most important essays. This groundbreaking book includes contributions from scholars including Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Williams, Dorothy Roberts, the late great scholar Lonnie Guinier, Duncan Kennedy, and many others. It is essential reading in an age of acute racial injustice. And if we think about it, it's interesting that after George Floyd was murdered, after you see even a glimmer of people talking about Black Lives Matter and talking about changing the way policing is made in our society and changing the way we interact with one another and changing the way the things are going on in the world, this drumbeat of this narrative was drummed up against critical race theory. It's interesting how that seemingly that, and as educators, you have to grapple with this because there is this movement to erase history and a movement to teach against. It's a movement to erase what has been done against people of color, to try to eradicate the teaching of that, to just not even talk about it, to just say, well, that's back then. We haven't even got to reparations. We haven't even got to quote unquote defunding the police. We haven't gotten to a radical overhaul of systems, but a theory has ginned up so much opposition. Think about the fact that a theory has ginned up all of this opposition and all of this outrage. It's just interesting that's amazing how that's occurred, that just a theory has made all of this to be such a bandied about.
Recording in progress.
There was an article in The Hill where this Texas principal, first Black principal, I believe, eventually was fired. He was placed on leave, even though he was not advocating critical race theory. The state of Texas, the governor, all of this had happened. This school principal, he was placed on leave after a board meeting, even though the school didn't even mention it in their curriculum. And so, and the principal ended up leaving Colleyville, James Whitfield ended up leaving that school because the outrage and the false outrage and the what has been made to believe, all of that has brought into place. So am I still sharing my screen? I'm gonna go back. So you have stories about this all across the country of principals. I was in Katy, Texas. There was a story in Katy where they were bringing in an individual to teach for a presentation, and he had a children's book, and the children's book did not address critical race theory, but the parents, some had made it to be where they just made it to where he was not allowed to come in to teach, to be a part of this presentation he's going to deliver. He eventually, excuse me, I don't know if I'm hollering. I don't want to holler. Eventually, he was, I think he was eventually allowed to be a part of this presentation, but this echo chamber of false outrage is going on in school districts. And so as Black educators, we have to know, how do we how do we deal with this movement and this facade of people trying to eradicate critical race theory? Um, I don't know if that can be seen. Critical race theory analyzes the role of racism in perpetuating social disparities between dominant and marginalized groups. Critical race theory's purpose is to unearth what is taken for granted when analyzing race and privilege, as well as the profound patterns of exclusion that exist in US society. I'm gonna stop. I've been talking too loud and too much. I'm gonna stop for a second. If there are any comments, any questions, I'm gonna stop at the halfway mark. All right, I can continue. And if you have questions at the end, definitely feel free. Any comments or questions at the end. Critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that race is a social construct and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. The basic tenets of critical race theory, or CRT, emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 70s and early 1980s, created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado, among others. So this is not a new, something that is new, but it's just basically the outrage has been, and the propaganda and the push against it is relatively new. But the false fears about anti-white, overstepping parental authority, and socialism and Marxism, these boogeymen, it really has nothing to do with critical race. It has nothing at all to do with critical race theory. And I was watching actually Comedy Central. I believe it was the Daily Show. One segment on Comedy Central, one segment, they interviewed a gentleman in Virginia, and he was mentioning how he was so opposed to critical race theory. He was opposed to certain things in schools, and they asked him, well, what is it? Why are you opposed to it? And he said, I can't really say why I'm opposed to it, but I just know I just don't want it. And that's a lot of what this drumbeat against critical race theory is not about what it actually is. It's about what people think it is. Because a theory or a social construct and this ideas, we don't have to fight or have to outlaw or ban ideas. And we want kids, we should want children to be critical thinkers. We should want them to be independent thinkers. And if we can't have them independently think and think that if they're taught about critical race theory, that they're going to be that they're going to hate, or that there's going to be anti-white, if you teach them about the history of this country and teach them about the system and things of that nature, it's really showing, it's a poor view that we would have of children, to think that they can't independently think, or that they can't think rationally or logically, that was even taught to them. But it's not even taught in the school system. And I don't want to repeat myself to be redundant, but it's taught in the higher education and grad school. Just a little picture, stay woke. But this is a controversial thing too, though. Wokeness has become this idea. People have made that to be something. They've used that to try to stop people from saying woke and woke culture and things like that. But we should be woke. We should have a woke culture. We should have a culture that deals with systemic racism, deals with injustice, deals with discrimination. We should have a culture. We should stay alert and woke and vigilant in pursuit of equity and equality and inclusion in all of these things. So we should stay woke, no matter how unpopular in some circles it might be. I've already gone over that. I think I went over that before. Okay. Just a couple years ago, in September 2020, I should say the former president issued an executive order excluding from federal contracts any diversity and inclusion training interpreted as containing divisive concepts, race or sex stereotyping, and race or sex scapegoating. Among the content considered divisive is critical race theory. In response, the African American Policy Forum, led by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, launched the Truth Be Told campaign. And that's what maybe I would hope maybe if we could get some feedback along this line, because there has been and Dr. Muhammad kind of dealt with this a little bit, but she made some great, excellent points about it. But what is the response that we should have? I spoke about this at the Rochester Urban League Interrupt Racism Summit, which was held September of last year. What's the response that we should have against this drumbeat of negativity and drumbeat of misinformation about critical race theory? How can we go out there and share? And then one of the things that she did, she launched the Truth Be Told campaign, which indicates that over 300 diversity and exclusion training. Well, I'm going ahead of myself. It says that in response, the African American Policy Forum, led by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, launched the Truth Be Told campaign to expose the harm that this order poses. And there are reports that indicate over 300 diversity and exclusion trainings have been canceled. We should not be canceling diversity and inclusion training. If anything, we should be increasing them. If anything, they should be going up. But over 300 diversity and exclusion trainings were canceled as a result of this order. And over 120 civil rights organizations and allies signed a letter condemning the executive order. The NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the National Urban League, and the National Fair Housing Alliance filed a federal lawsuit alleging that the executive order violates the guarantees of free speech, equal protection, and due process. So I saw some, if we can, people in the chat, I think I saw someone make a comment in the chat. What is some, you can unmute yourself. What do you think we should do as educators, as mentors, as principals, as scholars, as what should we do to combat this misinformation? I think someone said, one person I think said we need legislation. Anybody else wanna chime in?
I think we need more spaces like this on a regular basis
Ah, awesome, yes.
to build synergy, you know, and work toward making that change.
Excellent. Great point. Awesome.
I think it's gonna take a grassroots effort. If you think back to the civil rights movement, particularly the bus boycott, you had a lot of people who, we didn't have cell phones and all those things back then, but that information was disseminated through churches and, you know, through organizations. And I think that it's just gonna take us stepping up and getting that word out and getting that message out that we need to be, you know, teaching our children about their history, not just in school, but outside of school, at home. So I think that's what it's going to take, a grassroots effort.
I'm tempted to say Dr. Osby, but
That's correct.
okay, Dr. Osby.
It is Dr. Osby.
Okay, Dr. Osby, and that was one person made a comment. I think Ms. Fain said about we need legislation, and I apologize. I didn't want to mispronounce. I didn't want to Tiffany. I didn't want to, you know, butcher anyone's name. So please forgive me. I don't want to, you know, mispronounce anybody's name. But when I think about King, And it's well, many people now want to, they highlight I Have a Dream and all of that, but he was hated. The civil rights movement was hated in the 60s. So the popularity of the unpopularity, if we just say unpopularity of critical race theory, it should not stun us or scare us to not speaking out in favor of it or speak up I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, is that because something is not popular, King was hated. The FBI tried to smear him, and we know all of that, and all the civil rights leaders, and all of, whether it be King or whether it be Fred Hampton or whoever it may be, they had all of this against them. So because critical race theory may not be with the larger society popular, does not mean that we don't continue to bring out the message, continue to share, continue to have, and I think as Dr. Moore said, the synergy with these campaigns and with whether it be a Black education, whatever it may be, conferences, and I'm so thankful that the committee that accepted proposals allowed this to be broadcast, allowed this to be accepted, that didn't run away from it, because some might run away from it. They say, I don't want to deal with critical race theory, and I don't want to deal with that topic. But campaigns and it has to be, we have to go to just not amongst African American, but Caucasian and Latino and all races to share this message out about why this misinformation campaign is really what it is, and to call it for what it is. All right, Doctor. We need people of color. Comment says we need people of color. Anyone ever heard of a gentleman? I remember his name is Ernest Krim. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of read a book of his, Ernest Krim. He was a gentleman who I think he suffered some sort of negative action against him, some discrimination, and now he goes about. I think he's written a couple of books. I want to see what books he wrote, but he basically goes about sharing about why we need history taught and things of that nature. But a great point, Dr. says that we need people of color to help write the textbooks because so much miseducation will not continue. Part of the problem of critical race theory is people in denial of history. Awesome. Yeah, that's the problem, is that they say if you don't learn from your past, you're doomed to repeat it. And so we need to know, but we don't, and as people of color, we know, most of us know we can't wallow. We're never going to be victimized, but we have been victimized, but we're not going to allow that narrative to be like, well, just because it's in the past, you can't talk about it. Because you learn from the past. You learn what not to do from the past. Thank Chris. Chris said Mr. Krim. You can find him on Mr. Krim 3 on TikTok. Mr. Krim 3 on TikTok. Ernest Krim. I believe he's a teacher.
Yeah, he has a phenomenal account. He does a lot of traveling around the Midwest and the South. A lot of locations where historically Black events have taken place. Does really, really great lessons in like that 60-second time frame, and does a lot to, like as you've been saying, to put that information out there.
Do you know the name of the book he has out? The book that he wrote?
I can find out.
Okay. Tiffany, can you unmute and say that? You want me to read it?
I can unmute.
Okay, I want you said
yeah, I was
got
just
some
saying,
great gems and nuggets. I just want to hear you say it.
yes, sir. Well, I just think we need to call upon the media to help shed some light. We use them for everything else, our newspapers, our Black newspapers, our I don't know, MSNBC, whoever those heavy hitters are in the media could help dispel some of these myths.
Yes. Everybody, you remember when the General Milley went before Congress. It was a situation where I think he was with the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and they were sitting side by side, and he was being questioned by, I believe, Congressman from Florida. But Milley, he was being interviewed, and they asked him about, and he was saying about why you critical race theory. And he said, "I want to know about white rage." And he said, "I've read the writings of I think Zhao, and I've read about communism. But that doesn't make me a Marxist, or that doesn't make me a communist, because I learned about these things." He said, "I want to know why." And this is even with the January 6th insurrection. He said, "I want to know about what caused the government to be overthrown, what caused that insurrection, what caused people to have this rage and this to overthrow and to go in and take tables and go into the speaker's office and do all of these things to overturn a legitimate election." He said, "I want to know about that." And so that's one of the things he was saying, is that why, and here's this white male who very forcefully and share with this congressman about why we need to have critical race theory. And so that I think that's one of the things that we have to have, is that those who are speaking out, it has to be our different races too, to help share in that sense too. And I think that'll help. One comment says, "The attack against critical race theory is about the race and preservation of white supremacy. That is the core of the issue." Basically, race is at the core of it. It's the preservation. It said it's the preservation and the preservation of white supremacy in a nutshell. Is basically the whole reason. And so I think that is at the heart of why a theory, why an idea has jammed up so much opposition, because of that. The book, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Black History Saved My Life. Black History Saved My Life, Ernest Trim III. Someone was commenting? Also, I like what Tiffany was saying about we need to call upon the media. Not just MSNBC, but Fox, CNN, all of the different media platforms, basically calling on them to deal with this in a fair, we may not get them to do it in a fair way as really they should, but as fair as they possibly can. And as Dr. Muhammad said last night, it's interesting that no one has tried to ban feminism. You don't see the banning of feminism. You don't see the banning of gender identity or other things like that in society or in teaching. You don't see the banning of mental teaching on mental or disadvantaged persons or other things. You don't see the banning of other races months. But when it comes to critical race theory, when it's mostly, when Black scholars came up with this idea, that is the theory that has drawn so much outrage and so much opposition. It's interesting that's the case. And as I like what Dr. Harrison said, people can't take a part of history, take some part of history and want to embrace it, and take another part of history and don't want to accept it. You have to take the whole thing, especially those people who want to embrace the Confederacy, embrace all of that garbage. They want to embrace that, but don't want to embrace other parts of history. And so you had individuals, when it came to tearing down these Confederate monuments and tearing down these Confederate symbols, they were like, "Oh, we need to keep those. That's our history." But when it comes to critical race theory, we don't want to see that. It's a blindness. It's basically that's what it is. And yes, we can't allow the erasing of history, because that's what it is. We can't erase what's been done. That is what has been done. So I have a question though, at the heart of, as you are in education, as I go into schools, how do you, because I have a cousin of mine, and my cousin teaches in middle school, and she had a shirt on the other day. It had, since I can't talk about Black history, I'm just gonna put it in your face. They had a picture of Malcolm. But can we not talk about it? Can we not? Can we not? How can we, when you have school boards and governments saying that critical race theory is banned and you can't teach, whether it be in Texas, whether it be in Virginia, wherever, how can we then teach this and still teach? I don't know if that, I hope that makes sense. And still keep our, how can we teach this without, or do we leave the school system and do it on our own, or how do we do it?
I guess I'm not sure about your question because as a high school administrator, African American history is taught in schools. It is part of the curriculum. There are certain aspects, and certain things that are taught, but it's not taught as critical race theory. That's something that I learned as an adult at the university level. So African American history is taught in the public school setting.
So really, I don't want to say that I've even bought into this narrative. So basically, the critical race theory is not even addressed. It's not even addressed in the public school, middle school, high school, elementary. It's not even an issue at all.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
So it's just a false. It's almost like affirming. It's almost as if when in 1988, I don't know if it's 88, it's 1992, I believe, there was a gentleman ran for Senate named Harvey Gantt. And Harvey Gantt ran for Senate, and he was running against Jesse Helms. And they had this picture, this commercial where it said this ominous voice was in the background and said, this person went for this job, and it had like a black hand or something, almost as if a black person took a job from the white person. And Harvey Gantt was running to be the first senator from North Carolina, but it was said that this commercial was kind of what helped sway people to vote for Jesse Helms. And so in essence, what I'm saying is that with critical race theory and this outrage, basically white racism has been used. That's basically the nutshell at the core of why this opposition against critical race theory.
Is that a question?
Well, I guess it's a comment and a question. What's the comment, man?
White supremacy is at the core of the attack against critical race theory. What critical race theory is simply suggesting is that we look at how the conditions and the history of Black people in this country is connected to social justice. And what that does for those who want to preserve white supremacy is upends that. And so when white people in power who like to stay in power hear things like that, what that does, that's a threat to them. Because when that conversation rises to the surface, then what they see that as is a conversation that deals with attacking their sense of power and privilege. And so of course they don't want that conversation to happen. And so what they mask it under is, if these conversations are happening in schools, what they're saying is it upsets their children. Yeah, and it causes their children to feel some uncomfortable kind of way. Well, of course it would cause them to feel some uncomfortable kind of way. Or maybe it wouldn't. We don't know. The fact of the matter is it makes them feel uncomfortable because of all the other kinds of conditions and demographics that are happening in the country right now, in terms of the increase in number of people of color, All the projections around the people of color will soon outnumber the people that are considered the majority people in the country, and the loss of power that's coming in that way. And so this is not a new phenomenon in America. This has happened before. But this is all around race and white privilege and white supremacy. This is not new. This is something we've dealt with before, and it'll be defeated again. I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
No, you're fine, because I completely agree in reference to you saying like how this happens before. In order for me like to kind of survive this wave of like this attack of the CRT underneath all the other pressures that classroom teachers are feeling right now, I like the context to recall that before this, the election issue against teachers was how we address the bathrooms. And then before that, it was about Common Core curriculum. So teachers are always like in the crosshairs of politicians to like really set us up for a strong political campaign running. And it seems that it's happening again this year with the critical race theory. So it hardens me to know that as educators across the board, from people I've never met before, that we know this is nothing that's even within our classroom. We teach Black history, we teach diversity, we teach equity and inclusion. We don't touch this. This is a college level thing, but just for me to calm down, just like, I know what the game is. This is all for the sake of their politics, and hopefully we can ride this wave out. And then in between that time, continue to teach what we're teaching so that the next generation of voters are really equipped with the information they need to guide our country forward.
Awesome, thanks, Chris.
And can I just say something? In some ways, we do teach that, because if you're teaching any course around African American history, you're touching critical race theory, whether you call it that or not. Because if you have any discussion around anything that touches the civil rights period and talk about justice or social justice, that's critical race theory. If you're in a kindergarten classroom and you read a book about Dr. Martin Luther King and how he marched and was part of the civil rights movement, that's social justice. And so we introduce these concepts early, even in kindergarten. And it's gotten to the point where they're legislating any kind of material that discusses anything like that. So it touches our classrooms right now.
Yeah,
And so it is an issue that we need to consider and deal with.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you if you want to finish. I'm sorry.
I'm done. That's it. I just wanted to say that we're doing those things right now.
And that's why it may not have seen the question I asked, but when I go into the school system, I only go once a week to mentor. And as I said, my sister, who's a high school teacher, and I know she's beautiful, Black, and proud and brilliant, and she has an Instagram handle. I don't even know. I was on Instagram, and for some reason my Instagram got taken off. But her Instagram handle is Black Girl Fed Up. So she's just, that's her. She's like, but when it comes to what you can teach, I was just asking the question that, can you teach freely with all of this outrage, with all of this, school board meetings have been turned upside down. 2 years ago, school board meetings were not, you didn't have people coming to school board meetings saying, I don't want critical race theory taught and all of this, and I'm not going to have this and all of that. So I was just basically saying that as educators, are you free to still teach as you would like to teach? If you can teach Black history as you would like to teach, you don't have restrictions or ban or I don't want to use the wrong word, handcuffs or muzzled to what you can teach. So basically, you still can teach as you choose to teach, even with all of these these laws being put in place to ban critical race theory.
No, no, you cannot. You do have a curriculum that is board approved, and that is what, when you're monitored in the classroom, you're expected to be teaching that curriculum that is approved by the Board of Education. Mm-hmm. So now will topics, current events particularly depending on your grade level, come into the classroom, of course they will. But on the whole, no, you do not have the freedom to just teach whatever you want.
But would it be said that that kind of has been more restricted in these last couple of years? Because this has been, I mean, it really, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the critical race theory as an issue, even though it has been more than 40 years old, it really has not become an issue in our, it seemed like even after, you know, Black Lives, after June 2020, after George Floyd's murder and Botham Jean and all of the different, you know, police brutality has been an issue forever. It's always been an issue, but until the worldwide, you know, when we saw the murder of George Floyd, critical race theory didn't really become an issue until like last couple of years or so.
Particularly with the 1619 project. I think that was really kind of the catalyst that really pushed it to the forefront.
Yeah, with Nicole Hannah-Jones and 1619 project, yes. But that even, I mean, the New York Times has been teaching, or has been, some would say, a center-left paper for years. So this kind of, what she put in place is not really anything really outside the norm of what they've published before, as it is. But until this last, but basically this activist, Christopher Rufo, he was put in place to make this to be a divisive issue, to make this to be a negative, to make this to be anti, you know, whenever the larger society whenever the larger society wants to shut something up, they try to marginalize or scare people, whether it's, you know, defunding police, or whether it's, you know, weak on crime or critical race theory, whatever. We come up with these buzzwords to try to stop things from being put in place. And so, and it's interesting too, though, like great point I think Judith makes, that this also, after the former president that we had, and you had racism, and you had, you know, from the Oval Office, you had this being the bullhorn from the Oval Office of against equality, against equity, against races, against, you know, this is what the world was used to for 4 years. And I'm not making, well, I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm just against that, because I have not everything in this present administration I would agree with. We still don't have George Floyd, justice, and police, and we don't have a lot of things we should have. So I'm not going to make this just Democrat, Republican, all against Trump. But you had the government and the Oval Office against critical race theory, banning critical race theory, executive orders against critical race theory. So you have, like I said, a perfect storm of against it. I think I have one last slide. Yeah, just reading one thing. CRT is not a diversity. I should have read this earlier. Critical race theory is not a diversity and inclusion training, but a practice of interrogating the role of racism in society that emerged in its legal academy and spread to other fields of scholarship. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term critical race theory, notes that critical race theory is not a noun, but a verb. It cannot be confined to a static and narrow definition, but is considered to be an evolving and malleable practice. It critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetuate a racial caste system that relegates people of color to the bottom tiers. Critical race theory also recognizes that race intersects with other identities, including sexuality, gender identity, and others. Critical race theory recognizes that racism is not a bygone relic of the past. A lot of people want racism to be a bygone relic, but it's not. Instead, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on Black Americans and other people of color continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. So I think we're almost at the end, and I think we have a Q&A. But basically, as Kimberly Crenshaw said, that it's an action, it's a verb. Critical race theory is not a noun, it's not static, it's moving, it's evolving. It's malleable, it can be adjusted, but it critiques institutionalized racism and systemic racism. And we need that to happen. And we need to speak up as this, and I'm thankful to Dr. Diggs and those who organized this conference, Black Male Educators Symposium. I'm sharing it with SB22, hashtag that. I'm sharing it on social media. I'm sharing it through the Houston Association of Black School Educators Facebook group and on YouTube and other platforms. So as we share this message and we share to the world that we're not going to be bullied, we're not going to be shut up to speak out against injustice. Even though you have school boards and even though you have people saying, well, they lost the election because of critical race theory. So what? We still have to speak out. So what? It may be unpopular in certain circles. We still must speak out and speak out for what is right and what is the right thing to do. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? As we have about, I think, 7 minutes, Dr. Moore. We have 7 minutes left, 8 minutes left. Also, feel free, please. I don't know if there's a survey. I don't know if Tammy's on the line. If there's a survey, I don't know if there's a survey after this session. I'm not sure if there's a survey or not after the session. If someone if there is a survey, if you want to give feedback, definitely give feedback to what you heard today. I've really enjoyed. I heard a presentation on in the beginning yesterday, and then Dr. Billings, and then a couple of presentations. This has been awesome. I wish we was at Harrison's. I wish that COVID Omicron didn't hit, that I could be at Harris Stowe State University in St. Louis, but we just great to see your lovely faces in spite of all that still virtually as well though. But you guys have made awesome comments, Julia, Tamara, Dr. Osby, and all. I mean, the comments have been great. We thank you for your sharing and your insight, and appreciate those who shared, who really have shared. And Christopher, so if anybody has any closing comments, or I think, let me see if somebody's. Thank you, Dr. Osby. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you. Is Tamara in? Because I'm gonna need to know. I'm not a tech person. I'm not a tech expert. I'm gonna need to know how to save the session. I want to be able to save it. If someone can, well, I guess it'll save itself and then I'll send it out. But if anyone has any closing comments, I'll close. Anybody has any closing comments? There's thank you, Tamara shared an article. I don't know if it says the man behind critical race theory. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate from the New Yorker, September of 2021. Yeah, Dr. Derek Bell. So there's an article in the chat that was shared by, there's a great article by Dr. Bell in the chat, shared by Jelani. Thank you, Jelani, for sharing. I think I think I might be over time, so I'm gonna bid everybody adieu. Enjoy the rest of the session, because I guess we'll have a break in between the next session. But thank you for all. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of the time, and we thank you for being a part of this outstanding Black Male Educators Symposium. Thank you guys so much.